everyone, welcome back. Today we're diving into something I think we can all relate to, forgiveness. But we're going a little deeper this time. We're looking at forgiveness in romantic relationships.
Yeah, that's right. We're going to be pulling some really interesting stuff from Chapter 9 of Second Marriages. Why 40% succeed and 60% don't.
Okay, so get this. The chapter compares this quote from Abraham Lincoln about how mercy is better than just, strict justice to this Bible passage about forgiving someone. Not just 7 times, but 70 times 7 times.
Wow.
That's 490 times. I don't even know what I ate for breakfast yesterday.
Right. Like, who's keeping track?
Exactly.
Well, the Bible isn't really saying to carry a notepad around, right?
Yeah.
It's more about the spirit of forgiveness. It's about how holding on to those grudges can sometimes hurt us more than anyone else.
That's what really stood out to me in this chapter. Like, forgiveness being for you, the forgiver. Like, it benefits you more than the person you're forgiving. And it even talks about holding on to anger and resentment and how that can actually manifest physically.
Yeah.
Ulcers, digestive issues, even a weakened immune system. That's kind of crazy.
It really is. When we hold on to that bitterness, it really is like carrying around this heavy weight.
Yeah.
And it impacts us mentally, physically, you name it.
So, okay, how do we even wrap our heads around forgiving someone 490 times? Because that just seems impossible.
Yeah.
Well, the chapter uses this analogy, the parable of the prodigal son.
Oh, yeah. I love that one.
Where the son runs off, wastes all his money, then comes crawling back, and the father just welcomes him back. Open arms, no questions asked.
Such a good example of unconditional love and forgiveness.
It is.
And it applies to romantic relationships, too. Partners are going to mess up. They're human, right?
Yeah.
True love means giving them another chance, letting them redeem themselves, letting them grow, and not constantly bringing up those past mistakes.
That makes sense. But I think it's important to say here, we're not talking about excusing abuse or toxic behavior.
Absolutely not. Forgiveness should never, ever come at the expense of your own safety or well-being.
Okay, good. But it does mean, like, trying to understand, being willing to listen, and working through issues together.
Right.
And speaking of working through issues, this chapter has some really practical tips for resolving conflicts. They get this from a passage in James 1:99-20. It's all about 3 main things. Be swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to take offense.
Oh, I love those. They're so important. Being swift to hear, that's truly listening to your partner's perspective before you react.
Yeah.
It's practicing reflective listening.
Yeah.
You're not just hearing the words, but you're really trying to understand the emotions, the needs behind them.
I love that. And so often we're just waiting for our turn to talk, right?
Yeah, totally.
We're not really listening. And then being slow to speak. That means choosing your words carefully. Yeah.
Exactly. It's responding thoughtfully, not just impulsively reacting. The chapter even talks about using I statements so you can express your feelings without blaming.
Oh, I like that.
Like, instead of saying, you always make me feel,
Yeah.
you could say, I feel when.
Well, that's good.
It's subtle, but it makes a big difference.
It does.
And then being slow to take offense.
Yeah.
That brings us back to that whole 70 times 7 thing.
Oh, yeah.
Choosing to forgive, choosing to understand, not just keeping score and waiting for an apology.
So it's about, like, being proactive about it, almost like giving your partner the benefit of the doubt.
Yes, exactly.
This leads us to, well, the chapter talks about these 2 big pitfalls to watch out for, being judgmental and being defensive.
Those are the worst.
Yeah.
They really are roadblocks to forgiveness,
Yeah.
to good communication in any relationship.
So when we're being judgmental, we're basically putting ourselves, like, on this moral high ground, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
And it puts your partner on the defensive. It shuts down communication.
Yeah.
It creates that win-lose dynamic. Nobody wants that.
And being defensive isn't any better.
Right. No, it's like building a wall between you. Prevents you from really hearing each other.
If you can't even hear each other, how are you supposed to understand each other?
Right.
Let alone fix anything?
Exactly. It just makes the conflict worse.
So instead of those, what can we do?
Well, the chapter talks about this thing called ACT first.
ACT first. Okay, I'm intrigued. What's that?
It's a way to, like, shift away from blame and defensiveness. ACT stands for accept your faults, change your thoughts, and trust yourself to apologize first.
Oh, I like that. It's a total mindset shift, right?
Yes.
Instead of just trying to be right, you're trying to make things right.
Exactly. And that leads to better conversations and better solutions. The chapter also talks about being tactful and diplomatic, especially when you're offering solutions. It's about finding common ground, that win-win.
Right, so that both partners feel heard, respected, and Compromise doesn't mean that someone is giving in or losing.
Right.
It's about finding that solution that works for both people,
Exactly.
even if it means, adjusting your own expectations a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So what does all this tell us about forgiveness in relationships?
It tells us that forgiveness isn't weakness, it's strength.
Yeah.
It's not about saying bad behavior is okay. It's about choosing to let go of that anger, that resentment,
Mm-hmm.
choosing love over bitterness,
Mm-hmm.
understanding over judgment, and honestly choosing yourself.
I love that. And you know what else is fascinating? The chapter talks about something called advance forgiveness.
Ooh, advance
Like
forgiveness.
forgiving your partner before they even make a mistake.
That's a powerful concept.
Whoa, how do you even do that? Forgive someone for something they haven't even done yet.
It sounds tricky, right?
Yeah.
But the chapter argues that if you cultivate that attitude, it can completely change how you think and how you interact.
Okay, now I'm really interested. But how do you actually do it? How do you wrap your head around forgiving someone before they've even messed up?
Such a good question.
Yeah.
That takes us right to the heart of what we're exploring here,
Yeah.
the transformative power of forgiveness. We'll dive into all of that after a quick break.
So you said that advanced forgiveness can be really transformative, but how do we actually do it? Seems almost impossible.
It might at first, yeah. But think of it this way. It's less about predicting specific actions and more about a mindset shift,
Okay.
starting with trust, understanding, assuming the best about your partner, believing they have good intentions, even if, they trip up sometimes.
So instead of waiting for them to mess up and then maybe, begrudgingly forgiving them, you're saying we start with this foundation of goodwill.
Exactly. It's giving them that benefit of the doubt right up front.
Okay.
And that can totally change how you interact.
That makes sense. But how? Practically, what can we do? The chapter mentions some specific techniques.
Yeah. One of them is focusing on your partner's positive qualities.
Oh.
Make a real effort to remember all the things you love about them, admire about them.
Okay.
Think of it like a mental highlight reel.
I like that. Their best moments.
Yeah. So when you find yourself dwelling on those flaws, past mistakes, you can shift your focus back to those positive memories.
Training your brain to see the good, even when things are tough.
Exactly. Another one is practicing empathy,
Okay.
trying to see things from their perspective, even if you don't agree.
Goes back to that be swift to hear, slow to speak, right? Really taking the time to understand them before reacting.
Absolutely. And remember, empathy doesn't mean you have to agree.
Right. Right.
It's just making a real effort to understand their feelings, motivations.
So even if you're angry or frustrated, you're stepping outside of those immediate feelings and trying to connect with theirs.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Mhm.
That connection is so key for fostering forgiveness.
Okay.
And along with empathy, communication is huge. Clear communication.
So it's not just passively accepting everything. We're setting boundaries, too.
Absolutely. Forgiveness doesn't mean you become a doormat. It's about creating a safe, respectful space for both partners.
Mm-hmm.
So if something is bothering you, address it, but from a place of understanding, not blame.
Right. So you express your needs, feelings, but in a way that invites them to meet you halfway.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
And that reminds me of those I statements we talked about earlier.
Oh, yeah.
It's about owning your feelings, experiences without attacking your partner.
Mm-hmm.
I statements are a great tool for this.
They let you be vulnerable, but also authentic without making the other person defensive.
Yes.
Okay, so we have focusing on the positive, practicing empathy, communicating clearly. Any other techniques for this advanced forgiveness?
The chapter also talks about self-forgiveness.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's not just about forgiving our partners, but ourselves, too.
Exactly. We all make mistakes, have regrets.
Mm-hmm.
If you're holding on to guilt, shame, it makes it so much harder to forgive others.
It's like you got to extend compassion to yourself first before you can give it to someone else.
Right. And what's fascinating is that the chapter connects self-forgiveness to a deeper understanding of God's grace.
Oh, how so?
It suggests that just as God offers us unconditional forgiveness, we need to offer that same grace to ourselves.
It's like mirroring that divine forgiveness in our own hearts. That's powerful.
It's incredibly liberating. Frees you from that burden of the past, lets you move forward with more love, more compassion.
So forgiving ourselves actually makes space for more forgiveness in our relationships.
Yeah, breaks a chain of negativity, creates a ripple effect of grace.
I love that image
Yeah.
because it really highlights how interconnected forgiveness is, right? It starts with ourselves, then goes out to our partners, our relationships.
Absolutely. And what's really intriguing is that the chapter suggests that this advanced forgiveness can actually change how you experience conflict
Oh,
altogether.
really? How so?
It says that when you approach disagreements from a place of forgiveness, you're way less likely to get defensive or lash out.
Because you're not coming from that place of fear and resentment anymore.
Exactly. You're coming from love, understanding. That makes a huge difference.
So conflict becomes less of a threat, more like an opportunity for growth, connection.
Yeah. It's a chance to understand each other better, to strengthen the relationship.
Okay, I can see how this advanced forgiveness could, like, revolutionize relationships, but it is definitely challenging.
Oh, for sure. It takes work, practice, but the rewards are incredible.
So where do we start? How do we cultivate this advanced forgiveness mindset in our everyday lives?
That's the million-dollar question. Thankfully, the chapter gives us some really solid steps to put this kind of radical concept into action. So one powerful step is starting each day with the intention to forgive.
Oh, okay. So like before we even get out of bed, we're setting that tone for the whole day.
Exactly. You're priming your mind to see the good in people. Respond with grace, even when things get tough.
I like that. It's like hitting the reset button, yeah. Clearing out all the negativity.
Another thing is to create rituals of forgiveness in your relationship.
Rituals. What does that even mean?
It could be something small, like taking a few minutes at night to talk about any hurts or resentments.
Like a check-in.
Exactly. Time to just clear the air, express your feelings,
Mm.
and consciously choose forgiveness. Doesn't have to be this big formal thing,
Right, right.
Make it part of your routine.
So maybe it's like cuddling before bed and sharing what's on your mind, or going on a walk together and using that time to reconnect.
Exactly. Weaving forgiveness into your everyday life, making it an ongoing thing.
Yeah, and reminding ourselves that forgiveness isn't just a one-time event,
Like
right?
a journey, it has ups and
It
downs.
does.
There'll be times it's easy and times when it's really, really hard.
Hmm.
The key is to keep practicing. Keep choosing forgiveness, even when it feels impossible.
Because the more we do it, the easier it gets. And the more we forgive, the more freedom we have, the more joy we experience in those relationships.
Exactly. And that brings us back to that core message. Forgiveness is ultimately for us.
Yeah.
It takes away the burden of anger and resentment, opens our hearts to love, to compassion. It allows us to create those fulfilling and joyful relationships we all want.
You know, what's really stuck with me through all this is that idea of practicing advanced forgiveness.
Mhm.
It's a high bar, for sure,
It is.
but I can really see how transformative it would be.
Absolutely. I think it's a challenge worth taking on. When we choose to forgive, we're not just letting go of the past, we're creating a brighter future for ourselves and our relationships.
So true. Well, that's about all the time we have for today's deep dive into forgiveness. But before we go, I want to leave you with one final thought. This one really got me thinking.
Oh, what is it?
The chapter asks, what if we stopped focusing on what we need to receive from our partners and instead focused on what we could give?
Wow. So instead of keeping score or waiting for them to meet our needs, we're proactively offering love, compassion, understanding.
Exactly. It's a total shift in perspective, but I think it gets to the heart of what true forgiveness is and what lasting love is all about.
Beautifully said. I think on that note, we'll leave everyone to think about that challenge. Until next time, keep diving deep, keep exploring, and keep choosing forgiveness.
And remember, the journey to a deeper understanding, it all starts with you.